Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to tackle a grammar rule that trips up just about everyone at some point: countable versus uncountable nouns. Now, it sounds simple, but you'd be surprised how tricky it can get. So let's break it all down.
All right, let's start with a little puzzle. If I say, I bought 2 chairs, that sounds perfectly fine, right? But what if I said I bought 2 furnitures? Oof, something in your brain just screams that's wrong. Well, by the end of this, you're going to know exactly why your internal grammar checker just went haywire.
You know that feeling, that instinct you have for what sounds right versus what sounds wrong? That's our way in. Think of it like your own internal grammar compass, and right now it's pointing us toward two really fundamental types of nouns in English.
At its very core, this whole thing boils down to one single idea. Seriously, forget all the fancy terms for just a second. All you have to remember is this: some things you can count and some things you can't. It really is that simple.
Okay, so let's meet the two main characters in our story today: countable nouns and, you guessed it, uncountable nouns. And trust me, getting the difference between these two is the secret key that unlocks a whole bunch of other grammar rules without you even having to think about it. So let's take a look. On one side, you've got countable nouns. These are individual things you can, well, count. 1 book, 2 cats, 3 cars. Simple. But on the other side are uncountable nouns. These are treated as a whole, like a substance, a mass, or just an abstract idea. Think about water, or sand, or even advice. You can't really say you have 3 waters, can you? It just sounds off.
But what happens when you're not totally sure? I mean, how can you know for certain which category a noun falls into? Especially if you're writing an important email and you don't want to make a mistake. Well, don't worry. I'm going to give you a super simple test you can use every single time. Here it is. We'll call it the counting test. It's just 2 questions. First, can you put a number in front of it, like 3 dogs? And second, can you make it plural, usually by just adding an S, like dogs? If the answer to both of those is yes, boom, you've got yourself a countable noun. Let's try it out. How about the word apple? Can you say 1 apple? Yep. Can you say 2 apples? For sure. It passes both steps with flying colors, so apple is definitely 100% countable. Okay, now let's try it with rice. Can you say 1 rice? That sounds a little weird. 2 rices? Definitely not. See, even though you can count the individual grains, we talk about the substance rice as a whole, as a single mass. So it fails our test, which means it's an uncountable noun. Okay, so why does all of this actually matter? Well, this is the crucial part. Knowing if a noun is countable or uncountable is the key, because that one little fact determines a whole bunch of other grammar rules you need to follow, especially when you're talking about how much or how many of something there is. This is where it really affects your everyday speech. It changes the words you use for quantity. For instance, you use many for things you can count, like how many chairs, but you use much for things you can't, how much furniture. And here's a great little tip: a lot of works for both. So if you're ever stuck, that one's a lifesaver. And here's another big one. Think about the words a and an. What do they really mean? They mean one. And since you can only have one of something you can actually count, you can only use a or an with singular countable nouns. You can have a chair, but you can't have a furniture. And there it is. That's the answer to our puzzle from the beginning. All right, you've pretty much got the basics down. So, are you ready for the boss level? Let's talk about the really tricky words, the ones that look like they should be countable but aren't, and the weird ones that can actually be both. These are the ones that cause the most headaches. So here are some of the biggest culprits. Take a word like advice. You can get 3 pieces of advice, sure, but you can't get 3 advices. The word itself is treated as this single, uncountable idea. And the same goes for information, news, traffic, and of course, our old friend, furniture. Now, just to keep things interesting, some nouns can actually swing both ways. For these, context is king. Think about the word hair. If you're talking about one single strand on your shirt, it's countable. Look, I have a hair on my shirt. But if you're talking about all the stuff on someone's head, it's uncountable. She has beautiful hair. See the difference?
So what's the big takeaway here? Look, this isn't just about memorizing a bunch of boring rules. It's about being clear. It's about communicating with precision. Choosing the right kind of word makes your writing and your speaking sound so much more natural and effective. So the next time you're not sure, just ask yourself that one simple question: can I count this? Your grammar compass will point you in the right direction.